A war is happening, thousands of miles away, and it's making your groceries more expensive, your fuel, your electricity bills. You're not part of it. You didn't choose it. You might not even follow it. But every single time you spend money, you're paying for it. This isn't a conspiracy. This is just how the economy works. What's happening right now is not just a war between Iran and Israel. It's a chain reaction, one that's quietly moving through the global economy, affecting oil, food prices, transport, and even currencies. Most people only see the headlines. They don't see the economic impact behind it, but they're already feeling it. Every single day. To understand the economic impact, you first need to know what actually happened. For years, Iran and Israel have been in a shadow war. Proxy fights, assassinations, cyber attacks, and missile exchanges. But in 2025 and into 2026, things escalated dramatically. Israel launched direct strikes on Iranian military infrastructure, nuclear facilities, and energy assets. Key nuclear sites were targeted. Senior Iranian military commanders were killed, and Iran, furious, retaliated with massive waves of ballistic missiles and drones. During the June 2025 phase of the conflict alone, Iran fired 550 missiles and launched 1,000 drones at Israeli and regional targets. Then, in February 2026, the United States joined the conflict directly alongside Israel, launching what they called Operation Epic Fury. Iran responded by striking U.S. military bases across the Gulf in Qatar, the UAE, and Bahrain. The region was now on fire literally and economically. Iranian attacks on vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz dramatically reduced traffic through that narrow channel. And that word, Strait of Hormuz, is where the entire global economy enters the story. Pull up a map of the Middle East. Look at the very bottom of Iran. There's a narrow strip of water connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. That is the Strait of Hormuz. It is only about 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Now here's why it matters more than almost any place on Earth. Before the war, roughly 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products moved through the Strait of Hormuz every single day, making it the world's most important maritime choke point. 20 million barrels every single day. That is approximately 20% of all the oil traded on the entire planet, flowing through one narrow strip of water. Iran itself holds around 9% of global oil reserves and 17% of global natural gas proven reserves. So when war breaks out right next to this channel, when missiles are flying, when drones are attacking ships, when insurance companies are panicking, what happens? Shipping activity in the region fell sharply within 24 hours of the war starting, with many vessels turning back, diverting to alternative routes, or idling in the Gulf of Oman. The tap didn't fully close, but the fear alone was enough to change everything. Here's the economic reality of what that fear does to oil markets. Brent crude oil surged above $100 per barrel, up from roughly $65 when tensions began, a rise of around 40% in just a matter of weeks. To put that in perspective, a 40% increase in oil prices in weeks is not normal. That is a shock. That is the kind of number that keeps finance ministers and central bank governors awake at night. In the most severe scenario, if Iranian oil exports ceased entirely, there would be a 4% reduction in global oil supply, and U.S. inflation could rise to 4.5%, potentially delaying interest rate cuts well into 2026. Some analysts went even further. Significant disruption to the Strait of Hormuz could see prices spiking towards $130 to $140 per barrel. Now, why does the price of a barrel of oil matter to you? You probably don't own a refinery. You don't trade oil futures. So why should you care? Because oil is not just fuel. Oil is the blood of the entire modern economy. And when it gets expensive, everything else follows. Understand this, and you'll understand inflation better than most people. When oil gets expensive, here's what happens, step by step. Step 1. Transportation costs rise. Every truck delivering food runs on diesel. Cargo ships moving goods across the world run on fuel. Flights burn jet fuel. When oil prices increase, moving anything anywhere becomes more expensive. Even a 10% rise in shipping costs can push inflation higher. That may sound small, but it adds pressure on top of everything else rising. Step 2. Food prices increase. Farming depends heavily on energy. Tractors use diesel. Fertilizers are made from natural gas. Food needs transport and storage. When energy costs rise, production becomes more expensive, and those costs are passed on to you. That's why essentials like food are hit the hardest. In some cases, the impact is extreme. In Iran, food inflation crossed 100%. Basic items like bread, meat, and cooking oil saw massive price increases. Step 3. Manufacturing becomes expensive. Everything produced in factories, phones, clothes, cars, even medicine, requires energy. When energy costs rise, production costs increase, and companies don't absorb these costs. They pass them on. Step 4. The entire economy feels it. Higher energy costs spread everywhere. Transport, production, services, everything becomes more expensive. This is what economists call a supply-side shock. It's not that demand suddenly increases. It's that the cost of producing and delivering everything rises at the same time. And when that happens, prices go up everywhere. Not every country feels this equally. Let's look at how different regions are affected. Europe. Europe is highly vulnerable. It already lost access to Russian gas after the Ukraine war. Now it's facing another energy shock, and the timing couldn't be worse. Gas storage levels were already low after a harsh winter. Prices surged, with key gas benchmarks nearly doubling. This puts serious pressure on the economy. Growth slows down. But at the same time, inflation rises, which means central banks face a difficult choice: raise interest rates or support growth. Either way, the economy feels the strain. Asia. In countries like India, Thailand, and the Philippines, energy imports play a major role. So when global energy prices rise, the impact is immediate. Transport becomes more expensive, food prices increase faster, and inflation hits harder than in wealthier economies. Developing countries. This is where the situation becomes critical. Many of these countries are already dealing with high debt. Now add rising energy prices, a weaker currency, and higher global interest rates, all at the same time. This combination creates extreme pressure. For some economies, it can lead to a full-scale debt crisis. United States. The U.S. was already dealing with inflation above its target. Now rising oil prices add even more pressure. At the same time, economic growth is slowing. This creates a dangerous situation: high inflation and slow growth. This is called stagflation, and it's one of the hardest conditions for any economy to handle, because the tools used to fight inflation often make slow growth even worse. Here's the trap governments and central banks are stuck in. And this matters because their decisions affect you directly. When inflation rises, central banks usually respond the same way. They raise interest rates. Higher rates make borrowing more expensive. People spend less. Demand slows down. And over time, prices start to cool. But here's the problem. Higher interest rates don't just reduce inflation. They also slow down the entire economy. Businesses borrow less. Investment drops. Hiring slows. And sometimes jobs are cut. Right now, central banks, especially in the United States, are under pressure. Inflation remains high. At the same time, the labor market is weakening, so they're forced to keep interest rates higher for longer. And for you, this has real consequences. Your mortgage becomes more expensive, car loans cost more, credit card debt becomes harder to manage, businesses become more cautious, and opportunities start to shrink. This is the reality. The Iran-Israel conflict isn't just pushing prices higher, it's putting central banks in a position where every decision comes with a cost. Fight inflation and risk slowing the economy. Support growth and risk even higher inflation. Either way, the pressure eventually reaches you. So, what happens next? It all comes down to one thing: how long this war lasts. If the conflict is short and trade routes stabilize within weeks, the damage stays limited. Most advanced economies can absorb the shock. Inflation may rise slightly, around half a percentage point. Painful, but manageable. But if the war continues for months, the situation changes. Oil prices could rise above $110 per barrel. Inflation could increase by 1 to 2 percentage points in vulnerable economies, and the risk of a global slowdown grows. The longer the conflict lasts, the deeper the economic impact, and the deeper the impact, the longer the recovery. So let's conclude. The higher prices you're seeing today are not random. They're being driven in part by the war between Iran and Israel, a conflict you're not part of, and yet you're paying for it through higher fuel, more expensive food, and a rising cost of living. That's how the global economy works. And sooner or later, it reaches you. Subscribe for more.